Hi, this is Dr. Scott Young, and today we're going to talk about the QFS. We're going to get into the details of the QFS. We're going to talk about how the system might work and give you a lot of clarity on there that is pulled from a whole bunch of different sources that will be real interesting when we do this. Show you that coming right up. All right, so I'm trying to work on audio. I had a problem with the audio one day here, so I apologize. Sometimes when they get audio, then I can't really fix it. So we're going to walk through this, and hopefully you guys can hear me just fine with that too. Okay, so the other day I was trying to do this, and I was doing it from the wrong screen. It looked like I was not looking at the people. So here's what happens. So the QFS, this is part of NESARA. So let me show you a couple things in here. Oops. One area I want to just quickly deal with, since we're talking QFS, and I found 4 different ones on YouTube that and they had like 3 or 4 followers or whatever, and they steal my face, they still like pictures around, and they steal videos. Now YouTube will actually take them off, and they'll get after it pretty hard, but I had to find them. It took a lot of effort. Whereas when you go to TikTok, I went back through hundreds, and they go, there's no violation. I'm like, they got my face, they got my name, they're using my videos. What else do you need? My goodness, this is not like that hard. I'm going to share with you. Go to drscottyoung.com. You can find the website. You can find the, you can find the TikTok, the Twitter, the Telegram. I'm not even on Facebook. I don't even put that there. Don't do some of this stuff. I'm not going to direct message you, and I'm not going to sell you any of that crypto crud that is called this QFS thing. Block and report those scammers. I mean, block and get really pissy with that. That helps me out too, because they did it, and get verbal with them. Don't cuss, okay, but get verbal about, these are scammers, they're stealing money, blah blah blah. Just talk about that, because that kind of stuff. Think about your fellow patriots that are looking at that stuff, and listen, it's all of the patriots getting scammed by this. You might feel like the victim. We are way more than you imagine. We're as deep in the victimhood as anyone else, because we have hundreds of people like screaming at us. We didn't do anything with that. So I'm just saying, stop and think a little bit before you respond. Half of these people are like some Indian guy on there, and you can hear my voice. I have a Midwestern accent, and the guy's got an Indian accent. That can't be me. And even the way that they talk isn't the way I would actually approach things. You guys kind of know that with that. So the basics of QFS. Inside of here, the quantum financial system, the QFS, okay, is a creation along with Bitcoin. It's a crypto, but it's not. Let me kind of give you, it's a distributed ledger system that has a blockchain around it, which means that you can find, and what I've been told, like 100, several hundred transactions before, several hundred transactions as you go forward when you start to look at that thing, right? Let's say, dude decides to like start selling drugs. Well, this dude, he's, we can, if the DEA kind of gets in the middle of it and they have reasonable cause, not some of the cruddy stuff that you see on the court systems, they're going to be able to start watching that and see that direction of that stuff in the QFS. And that's really kind of cool. And why I say 2009 is that, and I'm going to do a video on this, the quantitative easing and 2008 inflation of money supply. And I had it written down here. I haven't fully kind of put that out there, but I'm going to work on that one. Because when they were blowing up the world in 2008, 2009, taking everyone's houses left and right, and there's a whole snot load of things that happen. That's when the good guys, the white hats, these main Chinese families that I call them the anti-cabal, they had brought in $83 trillion. Think of that number. They were bringing it in through America, through the financial system. That was the only thing to bring it in through is through the SWIFT. And I'm going to show you more about that here in a second. But through the SWIFT, it comes in, right? And so that money came through and the idiots held it. And I'll kind of show you a little more about that. But they held it and stole it from them. So they had to come up with a new system. Right around the same time frame, Bitcoin is coming out. I'll show you a book. It's called Bitcoin Revolution. I'm not saying you should, Blockchain Revolution. I'm not saying you should necessarily read this. This is how, the technology behind Bitcoin. But my white hat person was talking this one. And I was 12, 15 chapters into it. He's like, oh, that's enough. You need to look at the blockchain stuff. And I remember hearing about this stuff in 2012. I don't know what I was researching. I was like, I'm the idiot here. What am I talking about, right? So now that we see that kind of system, it was built there to slide the money in and also slide you out of the systems, okay? So the QFS exchanges the digital assets into quantities of gram. And that is the weirdest part. We're not exactly, because right now we think of the gold is what, somewhere $2,000 here in March of 2024, 2,000-ish bucks an ounce, right? Well, they're probably going to go to a gram kind of system. So they're taking those digital assets that are coming from the cabal, or from the cabal that they've taken away from them, and the money that they're adding in through all these other, kind of sources to be able to release the world from the debts and release the world, sums of money to be able to move themselves forward. This is not about giving everyone millions of dollars. It's about moving the country back forward, that they can be able to do the things they need to do. So it bases it off of, in America, sets a set rate off of the gold through the treasury. And that is the cool part there. And I said the digital ledger system. And the system is sovereign to each nation. We're not doing what mark of the beast would be, Revelation 13:18. Let anyone have wisdom. Let him calculate the number of the beast. This number is man. His number is 666. That would be a global type of system. When you really research the mark of the beast, that's a global system. This is not a global system. It is a sovereign-based system that Mexico will have her own QFS based upon, if they want to call it the peso, which that might be the name. I don't know what it is. Each nation will have her own system of talking about it, right? Now, when we talk about going from the fiat to the USN, the white hat military has been working this plan for a very long time, trying to come up with values for each nation. That's kind of hard because you look at like Zimbabwe. Real interesting. Zimbabwe has an incredibly devalued currency. And that was the plan of the cabal. They just do it all the time, right? So they devalued the currency to kind of knock it down to a realm that, doesn't make any sense. And then you see these trillions of dollars of notes, and they're only buying a small amount of product in essence, right? And this is the sick part they had to do. But then they have to go, okay, but what are the nation's resources? What are the potentials of the world? And we're talking potentials of the world. These are like future projections. If you were in a company and you were asked as the financial person to create a future projection of a new venture that you're going to create, that's how difficult that is. Now, as a business owner myself, I've done those future potentials. I've looked at that kind of thing. I've looked at other people's, including mostly small businesses, and I look at those and I go, what's that potential? And there's a lot of factors that go on in there. Well, guess what? There's a billion more factors when you're talking about it from a financial level, with that. And then, by the way, did you know that like, a year ago or something like that, the Zimbabwe government found like $13 trillion in diamonds. And I've been proposing, and some people don't agree with me, but I've been proposing they might go on the diamond asset backed. Could I be wrong? I'm fine. But I'm just telling you, it's real interesting, right? So again, they've been screwing people over and over again by the devalued currency. And when you think about the Iraqi war, where there were missiles going on above people's heads, and I'm in grad school at the time. I don't remember first, second year of grad school. And I remember watching like Wolf Blitzer in the hotel, and it's 89, I think. Again, I'm trying to remember that time. But at that same time frame, while they were screwing up the Kuwaiti currency, the Iraqis were getting stolen from blind right at that moment. And that's kind of how they do it. They've been doing this for a long time. Like you go backward in time, you go, why were we invading Grenada? I mean, it was a Jimmy Carter, I think it was a Jimmy Carter thing. And it's like, why are you invading Grenada? What did Grenada do that's like, I mean, it's like not even close to us, right? And that's why when you think about like Afghanistan or, Iraq, I'm like, what did they ever do to us? I mean, they didn't like specifically like target us. They're not like on our border that we should be going to war with. And that's the kind of stuff that you have to think outside the box with that. So we're taking that old currency, and there's a reset point. There's a currency reset point. There'll be a 1-to-1. They're not going to devalue that person's currency. Now this flies in the face of almost every financial person, because they're saying, well, wait a second, make up a number. Someone has a Bolivar note that I mean, what? $1 million Bolivar note. Okay, and it's more complicated than that, but just listen with me, okay? And so you got a $1 million Bolivar note. Well, if we don't give her back that kind of thing, we're going to devalue her. Now, again, we're going to give everyone in the country $1 million. Probably not, but there's going to be some way of translating that. But they're not going to steal the assets, where they're going to basically take you from this much asset. Sorry, I'm putting in the screen here, from this much asset down to this, so that you are at the same socioeconomic scale. Okay, now let's move on a little bit more of some of that stuff. And we hear these people talking about CBDCs, central bank digital currencies. And I had a guy just do this morning with me, and I was up at 4:30 and lots of stuff going on in my life with things and in prayer and a whole bunch of other stuff. But that stuff, he was like, well, I think NESARA is going to be like a CBDC. In essence, he didn't say that word. He's like talking about digital. And the thing is President Trump actually talked about this. He's like, if a country goes to CBDCs, they can rip it away in 5 seconds, unless you fix through the QFS the fraud part that I'm just going to arrow over here. You can see that on the screen. And they don't have a new Congress, Senate, mayor, governorship on all these other ones that we need to deal with. And when you put in those new people that have a term limit, it will change the whole systems. So every QFS, in America, the USN, will have its ratio on that international stage. Okay, and don't realize, you guys might not realize that all the 209 countries are a part of it, already a part of it. And you go, but that's not what's being said. Like in BRICS, well, BRICS has got 60, 70, 80, whatever. But again, they're not telling you everything. And they're not fully NESARA yet. They're just going into their gold currency. There's a bunch more things that have to happen to move into that kind of realm, which is why a lot of these countries are seeing the farmers revolt in there. Okay, so there's a lot of weird stuff. We're not even getting the full message out there. It's like you coming on the playground, and there's a fight between a whole bunch of kids. I remember growing up, we used to have dirt clod wars, right? And if the teacher walks out and walks in the middle of a dirt clod war, and we were inside of these huge tires, right? And we're throwing dirt clods at one another. We're loving it, man. And That's the kind of stuff we did. And she comes in and she just like does this whole thing. You're all on the fence lines for the next all the recesses, right? And it was just funny. And so when you're in the middle of it, you're not here, you're not seeing it all. You're not seeing all the details that are going on in there. Okay. So again, there's a bunch of debate, and this is why it's been delayed. Not just the war part, but it's a delay because there's a whole bunch of things like World Court getting involved with that. The QFS preserves that sovereign status of the individual and the sovereign status of the nation. And we need to move into common law where appropriate or constitutional law and come back to that. And really, it's a funnel from all these crazy precedent points that Jeremy and I were talking about. And actually, I've talked with a couple of people about this. Derek Johnson and I were talking about this. Is all these precedent points. And you got all these precedent, and lawyers will argue precedent instead of really the law, and they call it case law. And I'm like, case law is a meaningless point. And I know that they will have a hissy fit about that one. But what if Scott is a judge, then I can create case law in this non-common law point. I can, and you go, well, if he did it, then I can do it to someone else that way. And they will cite that kind of precedent point. And we act as if those are laws. That has to be stripped away. And that's part of NESARA kind of stuff. So what this also does is it allows for access and tracking of individual funds so that you can actually see all of your stuff. It's a full accounting or a personal financial system that you're looking at. Like if you've ever written out a personal financial, kind of form, I mean, it's really, really stressful to go through every little thing. This is how much you have on the car. You have a car, let's say it's worth $10,000, but you still owe $8,000. Well, that means you have $2,000 of equity in that car. And you have to do that per vehicle, per asset, per whatever that you go. And you might find out, holy cow, I'm like in a negative hole. Well, yeah, you probably are. And so that's some of the stuff that we're going to be starting to see as a response back to with that. Now, before NESARA, some of you guys might have seen this before, but before NESARA, this is kind of how it is. You got bank accounts, IRAs, pensions, houses, cars, credit cards, taxable stuff, and compound interest. These are all like part of your life, right? These are things when we talk about from a financial level, just on a personal financial level, these things are always involved with that, right? Compound interest is inside of the credit cards, the houses, cars, right? Whereas you don't really get that same exact compound interest. You actually get simple interest when you have your bank accounts. Your IRAs are under an investment strategy with that too. And they're all like, well, this thing is tied to this taxable part. My father-in-law just passed away. We're finding out like, well, okay, so when we take over that, what do we have to do? And there's these, all these crazy tax law points that you kind of come into. Okay. Now, this is where we in the world fight. And the reality is that the elite, specifically like the Clinton Foundation, they actually have set up sovereign organizations. They are like the Vatican. And we're not just talking 501c3 that actually makes you like answer back to the IRS 990 forms. There's nothing that they have to require back to. And I was actually a part of a sovereign organization years and years and years ago. And it was like, and we were setting this up. And that's what I'm trying to tell you. I was a part of doing this stuff. I was a part of messing around with how do you live in a company in a sovereign state without taxable income and compound interest that's going against you, and bring in that kind of stuff. I mean, I was doing some stuff that I was like sometimes way over my head. Now, when we look after NESARA hits, okay, with the QFS, the compound interest and the taxable stuff sit on the outside. And you gotta kind of see this and how I'm going to put it here in a second. So, for instance, the QFS will move you inside the brown box here. Okay. And it's going to do this all at once. Now, without getting into some of the people that say that you got to emancipate yourself in essence, in that realm, it would take us basically decades and decades for us to individually emancipate us. It's a much more efficient system for the QFS to bring you into that system. And again, you're not buying into the system. You can't preset that up. It's actually already set up for you. When it's released as a process, then that comes. It's kind of like you you fill out data in a database, right? Your own personal data, whether you're talking about for a bank, a car, whether it's a credit card, or even like an account with a physician's office or an account with a firm that you work with, right? Any kind of thing like that, they all create account numbers because they have these things in their own databases. We call them, in audiology, we call them CRMs. And so those CRMs, what we do is that they will have an account number. Now, we might look that person up by an account number, or we might look them up by their phone number, or whatever we might do. I might even recognize our voice on the phone, kind of thing, and know that is, hey, Jerry, what's up? That kind of thing. But here's the reality: it was set up for you. You don't have to do anything. It's the process of the business to do that. Well, guess what? The Treasury is doing that for you. Okay. What then it does is it moves, when it's ready, it moves your house, the cars, the IRA, pension, and bank accounts and credit cards all in there. We'll talk about what that does. I mean, there's other ones that I talk about that, but it wipes away the debt that comes in there. And this is because we're in a gold-backed currency, and you cannot take in the fiat debt that was done illegally. And I talk a lot about the illegal nature of how they deal with fiat debt. And they break contract law, they break constitutional law, 14th Amendment under the 4th section, the first article under the 10th section. I mean, just all this kind of stuff. They break all kinds of ways of doing this. And so what we're doing is going, okay, it's called a global currency reset. So what you do in that reset is you have to wipe the debts. And by the way, on every single currency reset, even on a nation, when they go in and do that, they wipe the debts. And that's exactly what happens in a bankruptcy. You're wiping the debts so that if that company is going to keep going and not just declare, whoosh, we're out kind of bankruptcy, you wipe that debts. Well, that's what happens here. It's because we're trying to push that person forward. So in essence, we're bankrupting the people, not for your bad benefit, but for your good benefit, and transporting you inside of a system where these assets are yours. But guess what? These taxable and compound interest will sit on the outside. So instead of thinking that like the IRS is going to just like go away, in essence, they're like the kid on the outside of the fence line. And after a while, if the kid on the outside of the fence line, he keeps wanting to come in and play, but if you keep him outside the fence line, after a while, it just goes away. In essence, the taxable stuff, the compound interest, they were never part of the system. They were part of the sick way of doing it, of doing this, is keeping you in the slavery. And they will just basically like wither on the vine. And there's going to be a closure point of some of this stuff, but they just wither because they're not allowed to be in the QFS. And that's really powerful. Then you have to see that. Okay. Now, when we're switching those QFS points, again, there's nothing you have to do. So let's just say you have a checking account. It's got $1,000 in it. Okay. $1,000 of US dollar. It flips directly without you doing a thing to a US note, 1-to-1. Now, for people who haven't heard me talk about this, they're going to go, bollocks. That's never going to happen. Sorry. Yes, it does. And it will happen. Savings account, $1,000. Moves in directly to a USN note. But here's what happens. Because it's now asset backed in America, we're going to go off a gold standard. You're going to have a value-based system instead of a valueless dollar bill that has nothing to it. That will have a value, direct value, gram amount of value that they're going to set here in the future. And what will happen, or near future, and they might have already said it at this moment that I'm talking, right? Or that you're listening for it. Sorry. Voice is getting all froggy. I used to have a lot of coughing problems, but I was singing a lot last night. My voice kind of reflecting that. But what I think is you might actually see higher yields in your savings account like you might have seen in the past. And so that'll be kind of fun. Because banks are looking at that's valuable for them to have in there. Those are assets for them, and they're going to have to pay you to make sure you want to keep your assets with them. Okay? You don't have to, but that's just one way. So if you have a bank CD, for instance, like some people get CDs for 3 months, 6 months, a year, $1,000, let's just say, for the heck of it, it's going to come back and it's going to be $1,000 USN. And that'll have a much higher rate. Why? Because you don't touch those things. So whatever the rate might be over here with these puppies, just savings accounts that are very liquid, this one is less liquid in essence, and you would see a potential for a much higher rate. It's just what happens. It's just how it's going to go. Again, if you have $1,000 in cash, change, whatever, kind of thing, it's going to flip just to $1,000 and it's gold backed. Now, some people think, well, I got to have the gold in my hand. You don't understand. When you go into a gold standard, the dollar bill that you have in your hand, the US note, or the note that you have in your hand is redeemable for gold. Do you understand what I'm saying? It's redeemable for gold. It doesn't matter whether it's in the digital nature of your banking account, which is in in a computer system, or whether you had it physically in your hand. It is the same kind of level, and it's a fractional or distributed ledger so that they can kind of get it out exactly with what the Treasury sets it to. Okay. Again, investments and the markets are going to readjust. So I don't care what happens. People think like market's going to adjust on the front end of this stuff. They never adjust in the front end of things unless the cabal is involved. Like 1929, right? 1987. They were trying to steal from you. But in this way, they're not in control. And so markets are going to be on the back end reacting to this. Okay. And there will be a lot of weird stuff that will happen with that. So for instance, if you have a 401k, like it's something that you really can't fully do, like your company does the 401k, it's just called a 401k. Let's just say you had 100k in there. It's going to flip to 100k of USN. But again, it will actually be a part of a potential for a higher yield in the markets, but it doesn't mean that it couldn't go up or down, and it very well could. And we kind of suspect that the amount might go 30% off, and that's real crazy to realize. But hold on, okay? When you think about that stuff, don't freak out about that. Now, I personally have taken my stuff out of the market, but you don't have to. Maybe you can't do that. Maybe you have a pension in this way. You have 401k. You can't move it with that. There's going to be some controls in there to be able to realize this. I mean, they know that there are people, if you mess with them, they lose their wealth and there's no way to get it back. Well, there's going to be a system. I mean, even in the simple IRA, which you have much more ability to kind of move that puppy around. They're going to have that same kind of thing. But again, if you had the capability to move it, I probably would, because they got so much Vanguard, BlackRock, and all the other cruddy things in there. Those are the things that are going to be moving down. But we're going to start seeing this economy start flowing up, and it's going to be real assets, real abilities, and real companies showing real profits. And I know that sounds crazy. You go, well, yeah, they have real profits. No, they don't. if they have real profits, sometimes if they don't hit their earnings mixture, they'll lose money even though they had real profit. It's because they overestimated an earning point. I mean, that's just stupid. I mean, that's a sick way of doing that. And that is the stuff that we need to kind of get away from. So we're going to see the markets go a little bit nutty with that too. Okay. So let's just say you have on your computer, you're tapping out your ability to move some funds. Stop that. I don't know why it does that. So you're moving this bulk of funds, whatever that amount that might be, to someone else. Okay. So for instance, let's just make up a number. Let's say the sender, you, are going to do a transfer, whether it's by some of those, cute app transfers, or whether it's a check transfer. So that's still in the ways of the systems, and I'm going to show you more about that. But say you're doing a $500 purchase, okay? So you're moving it to the business that you're doing because you're buying $500 worth of product or whatever that might be. Okay? So it's a check to check, let's just say. You wrote a check. So what happens is that check has to go in and it will be through, this is going to be kind of weird because people are asking me all the time, isn't XRP gold backed? Isn't XLM silver backed? No. You're like, why? I've heard it over and over again. You're wrong. And they get all mad at me. I'm like, listen, that would take public assets of gold and silver and applying it to a private company to utilize your currency, which means that XLM, XRP, or the Ripple that is their company, or Stellar, or whatever you wanted to call that particular group of people, they would have control of currency. And if they decided to increase the value or decrease the value, inflation, deflation, by some other whatever manipulative means, they become a new cabal. That is not the way the Constitution writes it. It has to be done by the Treasury through Congress with term limits so that we don't have a control point. So what I believe, though, is going to happen, and I'll explain this a little bit deeper, is that you're going to see that go through, and there's going to be a small processing fee. You guys are, if you're invested in XLM, XRP, cool. I don't care. But guess how you want to do it legally? How the banks would have a processing fee. It might be a few cents, but times thousands and millions of transactions, XLM, XRP kind of thing, they make a ton of money. Now, again, state to state or country to country, some people disagree with that, and that's fine. But here's why I say this. The Fed, the QFS, is going to delete the number of the Fed. So let me explain that. When you have an account number, and I just told you, everyone has an account number if you're a business. I don't care who you are. That account number identifies you. Now, the reality is, if I'm trying to tie the hospital to my insurance company, and by the way, some of you have done this, right? Somehow the insurance company goes, we don't know where to take care of this bill, or they're not connecting you and the hospital correctly, and there's all kinds of crazy things that happens. And then they deny the claim, and when it's denied in the EOB, the claim is denied, and then they're saying you owe it. I'm like, no, you didn't bill it to the right company, right? The hospital didn't bill it to the insurance company correctly. And this is what happens. How do you ever do that? You tell them the address or location of that. Well, what the banking people don't want you to know, or don't know themselves, and I have checked this about 3,000 different ways to verify this, and this is what I was doing through 2020. I kind of knew it, but I didn't know 1,000%. Is the routing number. Now the routing number, well, they say it tells you the location. You don't need the location of the bank. I mean, like, that's how we actually do it, by going down to the bank or tying into their systems with that. The routing number is the part where the Fed gets in the middle of it. That's how they track every transaction. So from a QFS sender to a business receiver here, that $500 normally in the past would just go right over here through the routing number. And the routing number's on the check. And by the way, the routing number's everywhere. And so they don't take a fee out of it, but they take inflation out of it. Or they don't let you have access to your funds so that they can go invest it for 7 days. If it's a big enough number, they won't let you touch the funds, right? I mean, it's just crazy stuff. This is your money, but it's not your money in the way that they set up the systems. So we're unhooking the Fed in the routing number kind of stuff. No, will the routing number stay around for a little bit, just for people to do it? Maybe they kill it instantaneously. But there's got to be a way for the QFS sender and the receiver to find each other. And that's partly what I believe XRP XLM could easily do that. And just buy a little tiny fee process with that. I'm going to explain this a little bit closer here in a minute. Let's just show you another one. So we got a credit card going out to the business, right? So the credit card transactions, $500. It goes from here to that business receiver, right? So you swipe a credit card. Now it's a very digital transaction, but a check is just the same digital transaction. It just requires the business to go deposit it. Well, this one is actually pre-deposited for you with that. And it's pre-deposited based upon the credit card processing of that particular company. So for instance, I have this company that goes in, and they're inside of my systems and they're inside of my database. So when I put it in, it's called a smart terminal. It's already inside the systems. It's actually even cheaper for me to do this through the smart terminal because I'm getting actually a quicker transaction point with that. And so that's what processing comes through. Okay. And there's always a fee based in there. But I think that when we have that XLM or XRP kind of banking connector, we're going to start seeing those fees go down. But you might actually have a fee here and a fee with the credit card processing. That might actually go in a different way. And those fees can be up to anywhere from 1 to 5%. Like on Square Card Reader, they like to charge 5%. But I think what you might find is those fees with those processing companies for you as the business is going to go down dramatically. And again, the QFS is deleting the Fed of the routing number. It's all inside every single credit card transaction because that's how it ties up. Okay. So how do you go to me? How do you know that we have the ability to pay for the monetary supply? Well, this is just one. They seized the gold from Jerusalem or from the Vatican to Jerusalem. There's this huge tunnel that were just mountains of gold. And, there's 60, 70 different huge plane loads of this kind of stuff that they took away. And this is the kind of stuff that they did. And by the way, we believe that might have happened 2017, 2018 kind of time frame. And this is the frigid relationship that Trump has actually had with the Vatican and all these other people because they're freaking out. They don't know what to do with him because he's got the military behind him. Okay, this is how that we're paying for the debt issues. Now, there's other ways that they're doing it too because the anti-cabal is, in essence, anteing up, their own funds to be able to kind of release the world. But a big part of it is going to come from them. And that's why they're freaking out every single time when you don't realize they're freaking out. It's they've been messing around with things ever since 2020. Okay. Did you know that the 17th letter even indicated this exact same thing? So the statement was, do we have the gold? Now remember, this is 2018, late 2018. And it says, yeah. Gold shall destroy the Fed. Think for a second there. Gold will destroy the Fed. They are a fiat system at the Fed. They don't want to be. They want to be central bank digital currencies because the systems of the SWIFT systems are very, very old. They've known this for a very long time. So if we destroy the Fed, that is meaning NESARA. NESARA is a gold-backed currency. That's the point of it. NESARA is an asset-backed currency. It's like the most direct statement, but people don't see it because they're seeing a term and they're getting all mad about the term. I mean, I see this a lot in eschatology. They get mad about pre-tribulation rapture or post-tribulation rapture, and they argue about it, but they don't listen, underneath the surface of these conversations because they're so anger flowing and emotions come out with that. Okay, again, show you another thing. But this is happening because Executive Order 13818. They are losing their stock. This is the Waltons. They sold 8 million shares. 1.5 billion. Billion. Sorry, I was looking at it for a second. $1 billion of shares. You just don't sell that kind of shares. By the way, did you know that Walmart had the highest record of earnings in 2020 and 2021? Why? Because everyone else had to close. All the little small markets had to close, and Walmart was kept open because they were an essential business. As a business owner, I fought the same thing by the Tulsa mayor, who was Mr. Cabal by himself too. And I just railed at this kind of stuff. And I kept my business open anyway. I didn't care. I didn't want to put those stupid glasses up front. I didn't wear a mask. I didn't wear any of that stuff. And I got chided left and right by business owners and everyone else saying this kind of stuff. But they are required now to do this. So the profits that they got, these idiots at the top are required to pay it back, because Executive Order 13818 says, if you have crimes against humanity, we're going to block your property and you can't do anything about it. They're selling in record amounts, and this is just one of them. I could show you bunches of them. You can go find it yourself. Look at, and the average share price is here, right? And we're talking about filing, and this was done in late February. They're losing their shorts on this stuff, and we're talking about different people. Robeson, Alice, Jim, Macmillan, whatever, David. Each one of these people, they're selling off. I don't know how much of their shares of that was. I mean, it says 10% owner, but what does the share price? I mean, how many shares did they have? You're going to see all of their shares go toward the Saint Germain Fund to pay for your debt stuff. And what happens here, I want to show you this one. This is a cool one. Now, you can't actually audit the Fed, which you couldn't audit. You can't audit like private companies. I mean, it takes a lot of effort to audit private companies because they can tell you lie. This is why you can't have XRP, XLM, or any of those other private companies being a part of it, because all you can ever see is the balance sheet. The balance sheet, and see what they do is they have a tiny little profit. We're talking about 6%. They don't want to keep too much in there, right? Because they want to distribute it to their people. So we're talking, and these are in the millions, okay? And then look at this. They were at a greater profit, even 2020, 2022, all the way to 2023. Around 2023, they started just to dive. At this point, I mean, last I looked, it's $151 billion a year to keep the Fed open. Whereas in Russia, by a gold-backed standard, the last I looked, this is the last numbers I saw, is $90 billion that is in the kitty just to utilize for public funds. So they're making money by having a gold-backed currency. I mean, like, that is the way you want to see it. And I want you to understand from another level. There's these things called profit and losses. Now, a company can go along with, a mild profit, like they have a plus number of whatever percentage. Maybe they're a plus 2% of their, gross receipts in essence. And there's always write-offs and EBITDA and all this other stuff, right? And that tells you what is happening. When we're talking about that either tells you this last month, So it's looking a month in arrears, excuse me, and let's just say that wrong. Or you're looking at last year's readings or whatever past year's readings that you're looking at. Like, let's say you're auditing a company because you're going to buy it out. I normally want to see 3 years of those kinds of gross, the P&Ls. Now, what I'm looking for is to see, if there's a real drop off in gross, right? Or maybe we're having a drop off in the net profit points, okay? Or gross profits, or there's all kinds of other indicators in here. But when you look at the balance sheet of a company, that's when you see their debts. Now, there was a time where I was actually making a profit in my business in 2009, excuse me. And so I was making a profit in the business. But if you looked at my balance sheet, it was ugly. It was 90% debt to income ratio. I mean, I'm clearing a profit, but I'm losing cash flow every day. And that's what we're talking about here. So the balance sheet of the Fed is bleeding profits. And when people tell me, well, the Fed is going to lower the rates so that people can buy houses and cars and other things, it jumpstarts the economy. The only way that they could ever, in any other past relationship to the economy, and Volcker, the 1970s and early 80s, who was fighting against Reagan and Reaganomics, and probably not fighting as much, but they were working through their issues. What happens is he goes, I don't care what the president says. I'm setting the policies. And so they were pulling back and they were raising the rates, and it was reducing the amount of growth of the economy. Actually, it was a negative growth point. And it's all based upon the balance sheet. Do you guys catch that? It's a balance sheet point. They were in a negative circumstance. Now, there's a whole bunch of, backward cabal reasons and that are happening out there. But there is no way any Fed chairman who was even in control of this. See, if they were in control of this, this wouldn't be looking this way. I didn't make this up. This is from the Board of Governors of the Federal Reserve System. This is their chart. I didn't create that. And when you see that negative number, there's no way they can allow people to have the money at a lower rate because they're already losing money at the rate that they're at now. If they wanted to keep it going, if there wasn't any NESARA, we are 30 times worse than at any point in time in the history of the Fed. We're 30 times worse than the Great Depression. You guys don't understand. If you're listening to an economist, I'm thinking of one off the top of my head right now. I'm not going to say his name. But think about these economists, and they're all talking about the Fed, and the banking is going to die and crash and everything else. And I'm going, we have NESARA coming, okay? This is going to be a replacement of this because their systems are dead. Okay, sorry, I got off on that one here too much. But a couple of the benefits that happen of the QFS, and this is real interesting. For a long time when I was reading it, I didn't understand it because I didn't understand what the QFS was actually going to do. And it said that it would have privacy from hackers. And I was like, I don't get it. But once you start understanding how blockchain and distributed ledger can set up, it's unhackable. You can't hack into the Bitcoin stuff. It's unhackable. Trust me, they tried. This is why they're freaking out because they can't crack this nut here. In essence, each person is going to be in essence when they sign into their QFS. It's like a trust, in essence, like a trust that you would set up for the beneficiaries. Like, so for instance, my wife and my son would be, parts of that endowment to my assets, right? So if I die, they can be able to get into it and disperse, what they need to do because I'm dead. Right? This is part of what happens. And so this is actually going to set up specific trusts that is, and we think it's a 4-part layer trust, or 4 different people can be upon that. I mean, it's really cool, but no one else can get in the middle of that. The bank can't get in the middle of your stuff. They won't be allowed. It's not a bank account. It's an access to a conduit. We're not talking about a bank account. It's a vision inside of it, just like Experian credit report. Just because I look at that one more often. Your Experian credit report is looking at your house, your car, your any other loans of diamonds or whatever you have on there, all those different things, and it's also showing like you're behind on things or this happened, and they'll send out credit report updates. You don't have any control of that, right? But your Experian credit report is your window into the soul of your credit history with that too. And that's where they get the idea of, your credit rating is 762, 428, whatever that number that you are at right now. And then that rates you in a different credit amount. This is how they kind of do quick credit, but it's also the sick part of the system. Here's the reality. In many countries out there, most people are unbanked, including in Iraq. But let's just say we have a sandwich shop, like a guy does a cart, and he's wanting to do his sandwiches with the QFS. Now, he's not partner, but just understand me. So he does this sandwich shop. He doesn't want to be on the doesn't want to really be in the systems because he's never been in the system. They just use cash back and forth, right? And so with the QFS, what he can do, and if anyone can get on it, it's a pretty straightforward. It'll be a pretty straightforward system. So someone wants to buy, for $2 or whatever, the currency we're talking about there, right? For that particular thing, they would just go QFS to QFS, and there's no fees. That's where the XRP, XLM, they wouldn't have any fee kind of thing because it's a direct transmission between the two of them. So that's what it's so much more, straightforward with that. But you're also going to have, we're going to see the assets, the bank accounts, the funds, all the stuff are going to transfer like this. And they're going to be very secure. The end user can go, well, I know that she took the money out, right? I know that he got the money. You'll be able to see it real fast. Again, it's not a bank. It's not a credit card. It's not a loan. It's none of those things. It is a new type of system as a window into the soul of your money, in essence. Okay? Again, I've said this over and over again. You cannot purchase it. You can't preset the sucker up. Okay? It is constitutional. It's the only way that we see this. It's a constitutional-based system that is processing from the Treasury, and you're a legal citizen of America, right? And we're transporting you, or in essence, there's this term that happens in licensure. It's called grandfathering. In essence, you're grandfathered into the system. Now, if you're cabal or you're a drug pen, whatever, crazy guy, you're going to not get in the system. And there's a whole bunch of fun things that come along with that too. Now, let's just go a little bit further because I don't want to take up too much of your time here. The fiat currency. So the fiat, which has no value, done by the Fed, it's built in the Fed model, which is illegal in the Constitution. I've shown you over and over again. That's why we're not having XRP, which would be a private company, doing the currency. You can't. I know you say, well, it's cryptocurrency. Right now, cryptos are a currency. I could trade on XRP or Ethereum back and forth, and someone transfers product back and forth because of the currency, or they have an accepted value, and then we have, it's X amount of value for that particular thing. So they transfer it back and forth because it is a currency. That's what it means. It's a transfer point. The currency of today, the US dollar, is also is a fiat currency point too. But when we go into the new system, it won't be that way. But again, this is what we have. Okay. It's built in scarcity. It makes people like, well, there's just not enough. That's what it means. And it's because they don't want you to know what they're making off of you. It's an illegal structure. Congress and Treasury are the models to do this. The Treasury is the first one they ever created. It always has an end because it's in debt. I mean, listen, I was in the middle of when I just told you earlier, right? And I was 90% debt to income ratio. I knew the end was coming. And I kept asking God about this stuff. Do I just declare bankruptcy? I'll tell you a story. That's just a 5-second story here. But I said this, I kept saying it over a 6-month period of time. This is in 2010 and 11. So my problem went on for years. Every day, I didn't have enough savings to cover one return, let alone two. Two was going to wipe me out. And I remember one day that two different people asked for a return of their hearing aids at the time, and I'm in tears because I have no answer for what to do with that. I took a day off the next day, just trying to like get myself centered because I thought, well, I guess I got to close this thing. But the reality that happens, God said, I don't want to hear. Said, shut up, asking me about bankruptcy. And God was teaching me a lesson there. There was a whole point into that system because debt always has an end unless there is a rescue system. Well, the rescue system that they've created is that they reset the currency. And that's what happens when we get into the debt structures and then they steal it from the people. Just what they do. It's about 20 to 30 years. That's why when the Fed happens in 1913, one of the structure points that occurred around 20 years later was 1929, and it finalized at 1933. Now, 1932, they got off the gold standard. 1933, it went from $20 to $33 the next year. So they'd already devalued your currency about 150% lower with that. And on top of that, or 130%, on top of that, you got you've already had the Great Depression raging for 3 to 4 years at that point in time. That's part of a bankruptcy. So they were bankrupting the old system and moving into this new type of system, which is part of the Bretton Woods Conference in 1944. So they were changing the systems, but they knew that it was going to come up in 1971, and it finalized in 1974, maybe around Vietnam, getting out of Vietnam. I don't know, but we're going to see about that one. The next one was 1999, and it finalized at 2001 or 9/11. And they've known for years that 2020 was the next golden gate, in essence, okay, of the debt structure dying. So we're past the red line. That's why I've shown you before that, when you see the Fed and then it drops off, it's way past the red line. It's unrecoverable. Okay. The closure is imminent. And the banks are freaking out because they're going to have to go by new models. In a gold-backed currency, what happens is that the value, the currency, you just can't print it off more because you want to add more. It's inelastic. You can't do it. How much you got is how much you got. Now, that's part of the difficulty a little bit with gold-backed systems or asset-backed systems of currency with that. Banks then won't be able to fractionalize their money. What that means is that they get it deposited and then they loan out that part of the deposit. And they used to do it up only 10%. From 2020, they went to a 0% model. It means they could loan out every dime that they had. Now, some banks have chosen not to. I know of a bank here in the Tulsa area called Region Bank who didn't follow that model. They were much more careful about that so that they knew they had assets in reserve. But it's because they chose that kind of system with that too. And I'm going to tell you, there's going to be a lot of interesting things that will occur when that happens. But they can't lend out streams of cash, which is going to be real interesting when we talk about this. The credit sources are going to have to adjust. Now, I'm going to do this in a later video about credit. We'll talk more about that and explain that a little bit more. And now the one thing that they always worry about, and they use this as a fear-based point, or I call it fear porn, is that it can lead to bank runs when there's uncertainty and they have speculation, but that's when they're speculating. Okay. When you're speculating, that is on you. If you make a speculation like a gamble, well, guess what? If you lose the gamble, that's your problem. Okay. But when the system gambles against you, which is what the Fed does all the time, then it's everyone's problem. But then they always come out on top. Okay. So the old and new relationship to banking is going to happen. So in the fiat currency, the banking relationship always bank controls the cards, not just the credit cards, but all the cards on the table. They know it. They write these long-term contracts. We're not just talking about the specific bank that you're at. It's the Fed with all the 13 banks underneath it, like Capital One and Chase and all these other ones. They write the contracts. They screw with you in every way. And then they get Congress to change the contract wording and do all these other things and go, we need to hold you title companies to a higher standard. Who did this thing? Who did the 2008 crash? It was the banks. It wasn't like the mortgage companies. They weren't the problem. It was the banks. This is what they do. Banks create massive institutions and they increase their corruption. SEC, the very first statement that if you read on SEC, the last time I looked at it, was banks are the most ethical organization that you can come up with. And I'm going, that's like the FBI saying about the mafia. They're really good guys, man. You can always trust what they say. Come on, guys. Banks decrease your education. They don't want you to learn this in school. I think it's going to be a whole different point on the NEA. They're not going to exist in that way. We're going to see people need to learn how to balance a checkbook. They're going to have to learn how to live within their means. There's not going to be another debt, wipe out. And by the way, people say, oh, we're not going to worry about money. Stop talking Star Trek stuff, okay? You have to have money. It's a currency point. It always is that way. Even Jesus talked about it many different ways. But they want to be your wealth advisors. They love to have confusion about how you manage your money so that you get screwed up and they get to take it from you. In an asset-backed economy, the banks become agents with less control. And because they have screwed you in so many different ways, they're going to have their tails between their legs because they're going to have a transparent nature. Hey, listen, if someone has lied to you over and over again, you need them to be transparent with you in the future so that you can build that trust, right? And that's why I'm going to say you need to find local institutions. And I'm not talking about the local Chase, local Capital One. I'm talking about local institutions that and you tell them, this is what I expect from you, and this is what I expect you to do with my money. I don't care if you have a lot or little. This is what you expect. You would do that to any business out there, and you would hold them to that standard. We need to hold the banks to that standard. The SEC, whether they're called that or whether they change the name or whatever, they are going to come after them like white on rice in the near future because we're wiping those companies, those organizational structures that are all just trying to protect each other. Well, guess what? When they become enemies, well, now they're terrified of doing the wrong thing. The banks are terrified of it. And the SEC type, whatever that might be, will go really heavy after them. And when you see what will happen at the EBS and the tribunal kind of stuff, a lot of it's banking. And they're going to be terrified. When you throw out how bad it is and what they're doing, people are going to be scared to mess with it. This is how you work in a pendulum swing. That lack of trust is going to change that relationship with the consumer. I mean, you're not going to walk into those organizations like Disney and Walmart and other things when you realize how gross they have been. And so what happens is that you change that structure point with them. And their consumer confidence is negative numbers. Well, you probably want to look for a different place to go buy your shoes, in essence, right? There's a massive need for consumer education. I know I want to be a part of that too. I really am dreaming that. I think there's a lot of other people that we need to have involved with that kind of stuff. So again, what we're talking about there, let me just kind of pull this off the screen. Sorry. What we're talking about here, and I kept you on for an hour, trying to keep it underneath the hour, but couldn't. But the point is that there's going to be a lot of changes, okay? And realize you're going to have to dig in a little bit. But it's not going to be like, I can't possibly do it. If you can do a bank account, you'll be able to do the QFS. If you can kind of deal with an app, you'll be able to do that. And if you, what about like a parent who can't do that anymore? That's why we have trusts. Like, for a while, I was on my father-in-law's trust. So I was working on his finances, and so was his daughter. And so, my his son, my son, or my son, his grandson. And we were working with his finances to make sure that he was taken care of before he passed away. And those are the kinds of things that are out there and vehicles that we're going to start seeing. So I hope you like that kind of information. Like and subscribe. Please share this with people. Subscribe. It really is important to me when you subscribe with that too. Okay. Remember, I'm not trying to sell you anything. Don't go off and go onto that QFS stuff and go buy some dumb crypto because of that issue. Okay. Be responsible in that way. Thank you so much.